Howdy everyone, Samyang have recently updated their popular and relatively affordable full-frame 85mm f1.4 autofocus lens for Sony E-mount cameras, and here it is, the imaginatively titled Samyang FE 35mm f1.4 Mark II. This new version seems to have exactly the same optics as the previous lens from just over 3 years ago, but now has improved weather sealing at 7 points in the body instead of just 3, slightly improved autofocus with a new linear stepping motor, which will be a good thing as I did find the old lens's autofocus to be slightly jittery. It also has a new focus hold button and a custom control switch to let you use the focus ring to change all kinds of different settings. Its minimum focus distance has improved just a little, and it's smaller and lighter too, so there's a good number of small kind of quality of life improvements here. It's $800 in the US or about £750 here in the UK, making it still potentially quite reasonable value for money. I'd like to thank Samyang's UK distributor for loaning me a copy of this lens for testing for a couple of weeks, although as usual this is a totally independent review. And for those of you who don't know, a full-frame 85mm lens with such a bright aperture is exciting, useful and versatile, can give you some pretty gorgeous images, which is why I love them so much. They are perfect for portrait and subject photography, and they also let in plenty of light for shooting indoors or in darker situations. Anyone who's handled the original lens will be pleased with the size and weight improvements of this new version. It certainly looks better too. On the side, there's the new customizable control switch for the focus ring, letting it work also as an aperture ring, and also a new focus hold button, which some people find quite useful. The focus ring is made of rubber now instead of plastic, a nice improvement, and works relatively smoothly and responsively with the focus motor. The lens still displays focus breathing though, zooming in a little as you focus more closely. The lens's autofocus motor is silent and accurate, and just a little faster and more reliable than the original lens, although it's not especially fast by modern standards. It works a little quicker in continuous autofocus mode though. The lens comes with a cloth pouch, the usual caps, and a fairly generous plastic hood. It does not feature image stabilization. The lens's filter size is now 72mm, a little smaller than the 77mm of the previous version. Overall, the lens works very nicely, and the new weather sealing around its body adds to your confidence in using it in difficult situations. Alright, let's look at image quality now. As I mentioned, it has the same optics as the previous version, but I decided to put this new one for its paces anyway, as I tend to test lenses a bit more thoroughly and carefully these days. We'll start by mounting it on a Sony a7R III with its 42MP full-frame sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on. In the middle of the image, we see sharpness and contrast that are good, but not quite excellent. Over in the corners, the image is a little softer, but still acceptable. Stop down only to f2 for a major improvement in those corners, and back in the middle, sharpness and contrast have become fantastic. Stop down to f2.8 and the middle is just as good, but the corners see a further improvement, looking pretty much pin sharp. The lens stays this sharp down to about f11, where a little softness and lower contrast sneaks in due to diffraction. f16 is a little softer again. But overall, on a full-frame camera, this lens's image quality is still nicely competitive. More expensive 85mm lenses, like Sigma or Sony's latest models, will offer a bit more punch when shooting at f1.4, but they're a lot more expensive as I mentioned, and this Samyang lens still puts in a fine enough performance. Let's see how it performs on an APS-C camera now, by mounting it onto my little 24MP Sony a5100. At f1.4, we are still seeing impressive sharpness and good contrast in the middle of your images, although the denser APS-C sensor is emphasizing a little purple fringing here on contrasting edges. Nothing too serious though. Corner image quality is again softer, but it's only really bad in the very edges here. As before, f2 looks sharper in the corners, and the middle looks a touch better too. At f2.8, any trace of purple fringing is gone now, and the corners are almost there. f4 and f5.6 see perfect quality in those corners, so that's a good enough performance on APS-C. I've seen slightly sharper, but again, for the price you're paying, the lens is still fairly competitive. Alright, let's turn off those in-camera corrections and take a look at vignetting and distortion on a full-frame camera. The lens projects a negligible pincushion distortion, but heavy vignetting at f1.4, as you'd expect to see. At f2 and f2.8, those corners brighten up quite well. This lens's minimum focus distance is 85 cm, an improvement over the original model, but still not very good really. At f1.4, the close-up image quality is noticeably soft. Stop down to f2 or f2.8 for more contrast, but it's only at f4 that we retrieved that biting sharpness that we saw at normal focus distances. Let's see how well the lens works against bright lights now. When shooting at f1.4, it's a poor performance here, with an assortment of different flaring artifacts popping up, as well as a lot of broader glaring too. Stop down to f2, as I do here, and a lot of that glaring goes away, but the flaring does remain. Now, let's see about the quality of this lens's bokeh. I'm really pleased here, to be honest. Out of focus backgrounds seem to look quite pretty and soft at almost all distances. There's the usual cat's eye shape to specular highlights in the corners of your images, but little in the way of outlining or other problems. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f1.4 we can definitely see some stray colours on bokeh highlights, but it's nothing too dramatic, thankfully. It sticks around at f2, is a little reduced at f2.8, but is pretty much gone at f4. Overall then, well, I was really pleased with the Mark II version of this classic 85mm lens. Its optical design seems to be aging okay, it takes beautiful looking pictures, and its body and handling are much better than the slightly clunky original version. It's not quite as sharp as its Sigma and Sony competitors, but it's still very good and costs a fair bit less, so it's a good value proposition really that comes recommended. It's nice to have so much choice on the market nowadays, isn't it? Well, if you're in the Sony system and not Canon or someone else. Competition is always a good thing for the consumer, and a very good thing for this YouTube channel is the generous support of my Patreon supporters, who I want to thank right now for their support. Over on Patreon, you get all kinds of exclusive bonus content, plus a warm, fuzzy feeling inside for making such a difference to keeping this channel trucking on. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed the video, and God bless.